Hi, my name is Midtown with DJ.Studio, and today we're going to be taking a look at how you might approach mixing songs together when there's a large jump in BPM. Take, for example, this little playlist here that I'm building in DJ.Studio. Our first track starts out at 129 BPM, but then quickly jumps up to 150, and DJ.Studio, without even touching anything else, has already identified that we're making a giant leap in BPM. We can, of course, come down here to Automix and just leave the default settings, press Automix. 16 different combinations have been tried, but unfortunately, there's just nothing that DJ.Studio is able to do in this case. If we were to add more songs to the playlist, then DJ.Studio would try and step up incrementally. So we might go from 129 BPM, moving up to something like maybe 130, 132, 135, even jumping up in terms of 5 beats per minute is going to be a lot better than jumping up 21 beats per minute in this case. Let's just jump over to the Studio tab for a second and take a look at what we've got by default, just the transitions as they are after the auto mixing. If we click to expand the BPM track, that at the moment the tempo is just ramping up very quickly from 129 up to 150. Let's have a listen and see what that's going to sound like. You can feel that tempo picking up very quickly. It's not very subtle. Okay, and now we're at 150. Could sound worse. It's not the end of the world, but certainly it's not the smoothest transition ever, and there's definitely some things we can do to fix that. Our first approach might be to actually extend out the automation here. So at the moment, it's ramping up very quickly. Within a matter of a few seconds, we could take that and drag it out so that it happens over a much longer period of time. But to be honest with you, that may even sound worse. Let's take a listen. So it's not as sudden anymore, but if anything, it sounds a little bit clunky. I think it's going to confuse our audience, but if the jump wasn't so big in terms of BPM, that might do the trick. Let's try coming in the other way and shortening up this transition. No, I think to be honest, DJ.Studio was already doing the best job it could when we first came into this auto mix. I shouldn't have touched anything. Although it is worth noting, sometimes in terms of transitioning, automating that BPM jump, quicker can be better. As much as it's a little more sudden, it's a bit less confusing for the audience listening to the mix. So what else can we try? Well, if we come back to the playlist tab for a second, you can see that I did have another song in my playlist already. And both the upcoming songs in my playlist are both 150 beats per minute. So you would think maybe they're gonna be just as bad as each other in terms of that same jump in tempo, that same jump in BPM. But let's switch the order of those and have a listen. We'll just click on track number 3 here, how far can we go, and drag it up so that it comes before Obsidian. Clicking back over onto the studio page, let's have a listen and see what DJ.Studio has done this time. So pretty much the same approach. Again, not too much that we can do in terms of going from 129 jumping to 150. Now let's listen to how the faster BPM automation, that faster BPM jump, sounds using these two songs together. One look in your eyes. A little more subtle that time. Don't get me wrong, still not perfect, but we can make a few more changes. In fact, the only thing giving me a clue that the tempo is jumping up so quickly is the percussion in the Let Me Think About It track. And that's the trick, is it's the percussion, the timing between the individual claps and kick drums and snares that really gives away the game in terms of that big BPM jump that we're doing. So let's just tidy up this transition. We're gonna come down to the bottom and make sure we've selected transitions, and we're gonna use the echo transition, and that's gonna get rid of that percussion at the transition point. Way less noticeable, right? Let's tidy up this transition, get the timing dialed in, make it nice and tight so that the listener gets so caught up in it that they're kind of just carried along with the music and they don't have time to think about the transition actually going on. A little bit of volume automation, I've put in a bass swap transition, and I've even added in a little bit of tempo automation because I think with the BPM jump this big that the slight climbing in speed adds a little bit of anticipation, that we are picking up the tempo, but we're just going from the 129 beat here up to about 132, creeping up to like 134, before we go into the transition, and there's a massive spike from 138 jumping up to 150. One look in your eyes, We just jumped 21 BPM in less than 10 seconds. In fact, in just over a second, we were able to jump 14 BPM, and that's because of the lack of percussion and other instrumentation that our ears can pick up on to judge that change in timing. I mean, even though it's only just over a second that we're jumping this 14 BPM, it's a good couple of seconds, a good few beats until the next instrumentation comes in, and even then, it's just a single note. By the time we get back to the vocal and the percussion that gives away the timing, there's been enough of a duration that we're not as sensitive to the fact that we just jumped 21 beats per minute. Of course, now that we're at 150 BPM, doing our transition into Obsidian is pretty trivial. There, easy done. Or at least DJ.Studio makes it easy done. But the reason that DJ.Studio is able to do such a good job here and that transition was so much easier was because that they are the same tempo, they're the same key. But you might ask, if they're the same tempo and the same key, why did How Far Can We Go work so much better than Obsidian? And that's because if we listen to Obsidian again, let's come down the bottom right here and choose Solo to solo our first track. And I'm just going to click on the volume automation node to delete it for a moment, just so we can hear what's going on a little better. Notice the difference? After the intro of Obsidian, it goes straight into a vocal chop with some percussion. Ramping up the BPM quickly as we go into the breakdown of Obsidian, you're gonna hear that vocal chop really quickly, and it's gonna give away that, yeah, this is happening. This song is a lot quicker than what we were just listening to. There's no room, there's no silence to do our sneaky little BPM jump. But just before we go, let's look at one other example. Back in the playlist tab here, let's get rid of How Far Can We Go? And now what are we gonna do? Having deleted How Far Can We Go, DJ.Studio automatically moved over the Obsidian track. So now that first transition that we made within the first transition window, that's been occupied by Obsidian. So let's just have a listen, see if it happens to work for Obsidian as well. There's that big ramp up in tempo again. It's pretty noticeable. Okay, the transition itself actually applied pretty well to Obsidian, so I think we can leave that no problem. But this jump from 129 to 150 BPM, we're back to how we started in the first place, just a slightly confusing increase in tempo. Like we said, there's nowhere at the beginning of Obsidian here that we can do this increase in tempo using a section of the track without any of those vocal chops or percussion. So the first thing we're gonna go do is have a look at the next transition. Using my scroll wheel to scroll out here and then drag across, let's have a listen to the second breakdown. It's better than the first breakdown, but there's an echo going on, those synth stabs in the background, it's gonna be very noticeable. Plus, in this case, we would have had to cut out the whole first half of the song. So one other option, let's go back earlier in Let Me Think About It. So here's Let Me Think About It at 129 beats per minute. You can just have a look here at the waveform that's been generated and sort of see the percussive elements, all these spikes, these transients. Then you'll notice there's a little bit here where these transients sort of calm down a lot. This is indicating that we've gone from a chorus, from a drop into a breakdown. And in fact, in here, it looks like there's almost no transients at all.
Let me think about it.
Okay, we can definitely use this.
Let me think about it. You say you want me.
Now, disclaimer, what we're gonna try and do here with increasing the BPM for Let Me Think About It isn't gonna always work, especially when the BPM increase is this big. And that's because by increasing the tempo of Let Me Think About It from 129 to 150, 21 BPM is really gonna be pushing the limits of the repitch algorithm. Basically, we might start hearing some artifacts from that massive increase in tempo, but let's give it a go. What I ended up doing in this case is similar to the BPM automation that we did in the first transition, ramped up the tempo from 129 to 136, a gradual and subtle increase just to indicate to the listener that we are picking up the pace a little bit. I think it sounds okay. Here, I've done a quick ramp up from 136 to 142, and that's so that I can use this little moment here before the vocal to do a big jump, because I don't want tempo to be increasing so much while she's talking and saying the lyrics, because again, change while there's a percussive, a rhythmic element, even like a vocal, is going to be a little bit too obvious. So I've sort of done a big jump as the vocal's about to come in, slowly increased it while the vocal's going on, and then made sure that we're at our maximum tempo for when that second vocal comes in. We're gonna set an expectation in the listener's mind of this is what the new tempo is as we go into this verse. Let's take a listen to see what it sounds like. You can definitely hear it, but it's not too jarring, it's not confusing. Quite smooth, right? We've successfully gone from 129 up to 146, not in a completely invisible way, but in a way that communicates to the listener that we are increasing in tempo. And in fact, most of the tempo increase is happening while the listener doesn't even hear it at all. And we're just giving the listener just enough information to get the timing right before we get into the percussion and the rhythm of the next verse. But that's not 150 BPM. We're not there yet. And you're right. And full credit to DJ.Studio here. It's actually done a really good job of increasing the BPM in terms of the repitch algorithm anyways. Unfortunately, at least to my ears, sounded a little bit funny being played back so quickly. Such as the composition of certain songs that are written at a lower tempo, once they get sped up, can just sound a little bit kind of rushed and busy, no matter how smooth we make the transition. So if I kind of felt like 146 was a sweet spot, and then the song continues to play out at 146, and then the final jump happens here in the transition window as we get to the end of Let Me Think About It, going into the beginning of Obsidian, and we're only jumping 4 BPM, so the fact that we've got a lot going on here in terms of percussion, it really isn't that noticeable, especially with the transition and the echo and everything else. And there you go, using the same method, but that is another way that you can go about achieving such a big jump in BPM. While it's never going to be completely seamless jumping that much in tempo, I think we've done a pretty good job here using DJ.Studio's BPM automation in areas of the song without too much percussive influence. We're able to sneak in a large jump in BPM.